Hello and welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Thanks for joining our webinar on this super important topic, how to measure and analyze candidate experience with the integration of Start with Lever. Um, so we wait a couple of seconds, a couple of moments just to see who's joining at this very moment. Um, if you're already in, thanks for being on time. That's really appreciated. So yes, let's get started. Again, a very warm welcome. We're a partner of Lever, and the topic of today is how to measure and analyze candidate experience. And we're going to talk about that. I'm Mark Berends. I'm co-founder of Start, and Thomas is joining us um, this morning to demo the solution. So he'll be demoing this in a couple of minutes. And just before that, I want to stress a couple of things. First of all, you can get in touch with Thomas afterwards. Contact details will be shared in the chat, as well as other links and resources. So keep an eye on the chat during the call for more information. That's going to be super interesting. If you have any questions to us, please use the chat or the question function in this Livestorm webinar. So we'll make sure to answer your questions at the very end, and we'll make sure to end on time so you will be on time for your next engagement. So at the bottom of the hour. Our mission at Start is to make the voice of the candidate heard in recruitment. And the voices of the candidate are currently not always heard. And we feel that it's very important. So hence our mission. And we do that for many customers. Most of them are tech scale-ups. You see a whole bunch of logos over there, but not just tech scale-ups, also corporates, large corporations like Coca-Cola, like Danone, like Ledbrooks. And what they have in common is that they care a lot about their candidate experience, but they also want to increase their candidate experience in a data-driven fashion. And why is that so important? I can actually best answer that question by a real-life example, and I want to introduce the company Elastic. Elastic is a worldwide tech company with 2,600 employees, and their case was actually this. They needed automation and better insights because, of course, at Elastic, candidate experience had always been a big focus, but they get some negative reviews on Glassdoor, and they wanted to dive into, the root cause, the deeper understanding of those underlying issues. And they started using SurveyMonkey and asked for feedback, but it was a very cumbersome manual operation, and it didn't ultimately offer the insights on which they could improve and could deliver a better candidate experience. So we got in touch with Elastic, and we actually managed to give them those deeper insights. So we allowed them to tell a much larger story. A lot of what was happening with candidates didn't always involve recruiters. So it was a much larger and broader story. And with the in-depth feedback from candidates, they were able to identify them and tell that story back to the business and work together with the business and other stakeholders to improve it. And the results that we actually managed to bring was an increase of the candidate NPS, so the candidate Net Promoter Score, by 11 points from the rejected candidates within 6 months of working together with Elastic. They gained a tremendous increase in efficiency because of the automation. And finally, they launched a dedicated interviewer program based on the issues that they saw. They saw that their interviewers were actually not that well trained, that they were actually, in many cases, rookie interviewers. And so they trained them, and as a result, gained this massive increase of Net Promoter Score. So sort of resuming and telling you in a couple of bullets what we feel is really important about measuring and analyzing your candidate experience with the Lever integration is, first of all, of course, improve and increase your candidate experience. by the insights you're going to get. Secondly is the coaching. You can coach your recruiters, but as we already saw, also interviewers, hiring managers, so the rest of the business. You're getting such a large and broad perspective on this. And thirdly, boost your brand, boost your employer brand, but not just that. Because imagine if your candidates are also your clients and they've had a poor candidate experience. There are studies that prove that they, in many cases, leave your brand, and that will cost you revenue. So it's not only your employer brand; it goes a little bit deeper than that. Then, of course, also just the efficiencies you would gain versus a manual operation. It should be integrated and automated, of course. Recruiters are so busy already. So, without further ado, let's dive into the solution, and I'll hand over to Thomas for our demo.
Thanks, Mark, for that introduction. And I'm going to share my screen so that I can start diving into the different elements. And here we've got the infinite loop, so it's all good. All right, so we're first going to look at the candidate side of things. So starting with the invitation as well as an example survey. What you'll also see after is we'll go into the automation that makes these invitations possible. And of course, at the end, once we've sent these surveys, once we've automated the sending of them, we'll look at the analytics and the dashboard and see what kind of insights you can expect. So as we look here, of course, a very recognizable logo. Coca-Cola is one of our partners. But in the case of your candidates receiving this email, it would be even more recognizable because they've just applied to your company. So the logo would be very familiar to them. And of course, here we can also add a nice familiar face. Can be the last person they spoke to, or it can also be a more senior member of the team, just with the idea that, hey, we care about your feedback, so please do respond. What you see here, all of it is customizable down to the very color of these buttons here. So, of course, including the outro, the intro, but we also want it to be not just customizable, but personalized towards the candidate. So we have these first name fields, role in this case, and office. And of course, this is pulling the information from your ATS so that you don't have to worry about these emails manually. And now you see we also put the very first question in the email. And so you might recognize this question: how likely is it that you would recommend us to a friend? That's the Net Promoter Score, right? In this case, the candidate Net Promoter Score. And as soon as they click on an answer, they'll be directed to the full-length survey. It's good to know, though, that if they didn't actually want to fill out the full questionnaire and just this question, if they close the tab, we'll save that answer for you. And as we're in the questionnaire here, you'll notice we're still fully on brand here. And we've also got different language options and different anonymity options based on your preferences. Already you can see that we have a dynamic survey with questions that recognize the score. And of course, you'll see we always have quantitative questions because those make really great averages and dashboards later on. But we also know that when it comes to understanding the reason for the score, then qualitative feedback is really unmatched. And so we'll always leave room for both. Of course, you'll also notice we're allowing people to skip questions here. And the reason is that we don't want to force them to answer questions. What we want is to collect the data that they care enough about to share. And if we just force them to answer questions, then you risk of course, them closing the survey or just them putting random information, which ultimately won't be helpful to you. And of course, I'm not going too much into the question themselves because it's your funnel, it's your organization. You know what questions to ask, and so we'll help you make sure that the survey is, as catered to your recruitment process as possible. And once the candidate is happy with the answers, they can submit the survey, and then they're taken to this dynamic thank you page. And it's dynamic because it recognizes the Net Promoter Score. And in this case, because I'm a promoter, it's actually going to prompt me to write a review. And we've already linked the Glassdoor page to this button so that they can super easily write you a great review on the process. And now, of course, if they are a detractor, so scoring 6 or below, then we don't want them to go on Glassdoor and say bad things about you. So we can have a different page. And what we can also do is actually send a sort of firefighter notification to the right person in your organization saying, hey, in this case, Thomas didn't have such a great experience with this application. Maybe you want to circle back and make sure his feedback is heard. Now, I'll just finish off on the candidate side of things, saying that we, of course, do have a template gallery where we use all of our best-in-class questions to help you with the process of getting surveys. So, for example, if I want the interview, then we have the rejected after interview survey where we can preview it. We can skip through. We can also see that it's mobile compatible. And if you wanted to add the survey, you could add the survey to your account. And then you could also edit some of the questions so that you can already make it more custom. Now, I'm going to go in the automate section here to start talking about how we send those surveys to the right person at the right time. And so we have connect. This is our starred connect page where you'll see all of the ATSs which we connect with. And here you'll find lever. And of course, when you first log on, it'll first say connect, not manage. But it's a simple matter of copy pasting your subdomain and your token, API token, and within minutes, maybe seconds even, then our systems are speaking to each other. And then you can get to this page where you actually see the workflows. And in this case, they're inactive, but when we read them, there's candidate hired, rejected after on-site interview, rejected after phone screen, after application. So these are all stages that we're familiar with. And when we look at inside of one of these, so I'm going to pick rejected after on-site interview, we can see they're always made out of 3 simple business rules: the trigger, the filter, and the action. Now, of course, the trigger comes from Lever, where they send us a notification, and then we have it triggered when the archive state is changed. We can look here. And of course, we set these preliminary trigger conditions to make sure that the trigger is correct. And we can also get a bit more granular with how we filter these triggers in the filter, of course. Now, here, as I click on the trigger on the field, I can already see that there's a long list of tokens that we pull from Lever. And essentially, if it's a token that Lever lets us pull, then you can create a filter on it. So for example, if you want to find the hiring manager name or the department, then this will be where you can find this. And a good example of why you might need this is, say your finance department and your engineering department have different recruitment processes where maybe engineering has an assessment, then it makes sense to send them different surveys as well to reflect the differences in the recruitment funnel. And this is where you can get really granular with how you're sending different surveys. And finally, if it makes it through the filter, then the action will be triggered. And this is scheduling or sending the invitation. Of course, we always recommend scheduling it, especially when they're rejected, because the last thing we want is for them to be instantly reminded that they got rejected. And so, in fact, giving them 3 or 4 days to cool off can be ideal to remove the bias and really have them be objective in the survey response. As I'm scrolling down here, we'll see, of course, you can pick your survey template. You can pick your email template, the language in which it's sent in. And as I scroll all the way down here, you'll see we also can trigger a reminder so that if they don't fill it out the first time, well, maybe they'll do it the second time. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time here explaining these custom fields. And I think these custom fields are really interesting and really important because this is you telling Starred that this is the information that you want us to pull along with the experience data so that when you go into the dashboard, you can actually filter the surveys on these specific fields. So for example, we talked about department, but say you sent the same survey to everybody in the finance department, but different people in the finance department came through different sources. Well, you can see in the dashboard later on how maybe different sources have a different candidate experience. And so I'm not going to have you imagine this any longer. I can just go right into the dashboard to get into this filtering capability. And as I scroll down here, you see these are all of the filter options that we have. So of course we have the date, we have the stage, the source, rejected reason, and etc. I won't go over them all because again, if it's a token that lever lets us pull, then it's a token that we pull and that you can then create a filter on. And now as I scroll down, we're going to start seeing the results of our surveys. So here we see already the response, number of responses, and the total response rates. And as I scroll down here, of course, I see the overall CNPS or Candidate Net Promoter Score, but more interesting is already separating it by hired, rejected, and withdrawn. And what we'll see is, of course, the rejected has the highest number of responses, of course, because most of your candidates will end up rejected. And it also has the lowest Net Promoter Score. So now we can scroll even further to see, okay, this is now the average score of the questions sent to rejected candidates. So we have the amount of communication and etc. But now if I want to see the qualitative feedback, I can just scroll down a little bit more to see the qualitative feedback. Now, of course, we also want this dashboard to be dynamic. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So let me scroll up. And out of all of these questions, I see that preparation of interview scores a 6.4. That's the lowest score. So now I can click on this bar and we'll see that the platform is filtering out all of the responses. And now when I scroll below, I can actually see all of the comments that were left by this in regards to this question. So here we see hardly any prep. Yeah, there was no interview prep. So that's already something you can work on as a recruitment team. And now we can unclick it to unfilter the data. And I can keep scrolling through to see some more information. So here we also have the comments left underneath the Net Promoter Score question, which you'll remember is the very first question in the survey. And so this is now divided through positive, passive, and negative, or detractors. And now as I scroll lower, we'll see this examples of the kinds of dashboards that we can build. And I say build because that's really what we do. Based on your specific needs as an organization, then we can show up different dashboards. And so, for example, this one I like a lot because it's very easy to have a bias of thinking, well, the faster the better. So we just send those responses really quickly. But then here in this case, with this data, it turns out actually 4 to 5 weeks, that's the sweet spot. And 1 to 3 weeks, that's actually negatively impacting the Net Promoter Score. And in this case, rather than guess which is the best time frame, we can just look at the data and stop making guesses and start taking action. Now, of course, we have the source again here. And in theory, it shouldn't really matter where they come from, right? Everybody should have a great experience. But when it comes to those referrals, so people referred to by colleagues, for example, then you want to make sure that they're also getting like top-notch experience, because if they go to their friend and say, hey, you recommended me here, but I have a bad experience, well, it can also impact employee engagement. And yeah, as I scroll through, we'll see, of course, different examples by department, by geography. But I'm going to spend a little bit more time to explain this dashboard here. And this is our priority matrix. And so I'm going to filter on a rejection after interview stage. And as that's filtering, we already see the different quadrants: improve, leverage, monitor, maintain. And what we do is we correlate each question asked in the survey to the very first question, the Net Promoter Score question. And what we're able to see is which question has the highest correlation with your low NPS scores. And of course, then we rank it in this little priorities checklist, but also it's really easy to see visually, okay, well, this point, preparation of interview, this has a high negative impact, which is also the question that we saw earlier. And so what we can conclude from there, of course, is that improving on this point will go the longest way in turning people into promoters or having at least less detractors. And now, of course, 2 and 3 in this case, are things that your candidates are really appreciating. So those are things that as a recruitment team, you can be proud of and you can continue doing to make your candidates happy. And the bottom of the list can serve as a really good reality check, right? Because maybe you thought that you had to make this application form super easy to fill or the job super easy to find. But actually, it turns out it's not that relevant to candidates, and perhaps focusing on making the preparation of interview material more easily accessible would go a longer way into turning people into promoters instead of this easy to find job online point. And so, of course, now we've really zoomed in to very specific points. Of course, we can scroll all the way back up to filter on, for example, different departments and see how the priority matrix might change there. But now I want to zoom out a little bit and look at the people journey. And the people journey, we also call it sometimes the management summary, where you'll see your survey sent, response rate, and comments received in the last 30 days. And when I scroll down a little bit, we can see that we'll have your NPS compared to the benchmark NPS. Let's have it not filtered yet. And as I scroll down, we can see all of the journey types which you're measuring and your net promoter score compared, of course, to the benchmark. And now I showed you earlier a little bit, but we've got these filters. So we can filter the benchmark to be even more specific, right? Because you want to compare yourself against your competitors. So we can filter on location, we can filter on employee size, and we can filter on industry. So I had it on information technology. Of course, that's very useful. So for example, if I click on this interview, I can see we've got a plus 31 and they have a -6. So we're greatly overperforming. That's great news. And when I scroll down, we can see even more in-depth insight into this point, where we can see, of course, the distribution, and we can actually also see our response rate versus the benchmark. So although we're overperforming our NPS, we're actually underperforming in the response rate. So perhaps that's a good thing to look into. And of course, this is sort of concludes this presentation here. But I do want to remind you guys that I'm more than happy to go more in depth in this platform in a call. There's so much more to talk about. Of course, candidate experience is a really important topic. But for now, I'll hand the floor back to Mark, who will take it away with some key takeaways.
Thank you, Thomas. While you were watching the demo, we have shared a couple of things in the chat bot, and I want to just quickly mention them. First of all, the Elastic case that I took out a couple of quotes from, so you can read that in its entirety. Second is the survey template. It's accessible online, so you can have a deeper look into the survey questions that are in our templates, and the templates are really the best in class examples that we see around with our top clients. So we've compiled them and made that into the best in class survey template to not have you browse through, let's say 10 versions, but just have a perfect version for you to start with or to completely use as is. And finally, we shared our latest benchmark report, which is the first half year of 2021. We're working on the full year 2021, and that will be released shortly. So watch the space, but you can have already a look at the benchmark report that we have available by clicking the link. So let's quickly recap what we've seen. First of all, of course, the view from the respondent, your candidate, and that should be really easy, right? So asking for feedback should not be a challenge. So first of all, we asked the question already in the email, so there's no link to say participate in a research or click the link to the survey. People don't want to do that. People want to give their opinion though, so they can immediately do that. It's personal. We pull some tags from your ATS to make that relevant for them, and it's completely on brand. Secondly, of course, is the measuring and the analytics part. We ended with the overall view. It's of course really important that if you score a +3, you want to know what the benchmark is. It doesn't seem that high, but remember, we talk about rejected candidates. So we actually send a survey to a candidate once the process has ended for them by either they be rejected or they withdraw or you hire them. So remember, the first part is actually quite negative in terms of NPS. So you're doing a great job if you have a positive NPS. The next one I want to recap is the priority matrix, of course. You want to have actionable insights. You want to have those maybe on a recruiter level to say, hey, this is your priority matrix. If you focus on the feedback you give to your candidates, you'll improve your NPS the longest way. Or for someone else, that would be if you prepare your candidates for interview a little bit better, they'll be more appreciative. So that's our priority matrix, which really is an actionable insight. So yeah, I always find these remarkable. These are real comments made by real candidates, and our clients are also really blown away once it's enabled, once the workflows go live and they get the actual feedback. That's so super, amazing actually, because your candidates have so much to say. And we say in the company, 2022 is the year of the candidate. Sounds a little bit corny, but it actually is. I mean, every year should be the year of the candidate, but this year, of course, the labor market is so ultimately tight, and the hunt for talent is so difficult. You have to stand out. You have to improve your candidate experience each and every day. And what you don't measure, you actually cannot improve. So looking at the analytics, but also looking at the quantitative and qualitative feedback is super important. And we'll bring it just to your laptop. By the way, it may have seemed a little bit difficult, like setting up workflows, for example, but rest assured we have an extensive onboarding process to help you out with all that. Let me quickly check the questions. Daniel, great to have you again. Are there any specific differences between the integration with different ATSs? That's a good question. I know you have had experience with Greenhouse. Now this is Lever. No, they're basically the same. Maybe the only thing is that the APIs of different ATSs differ a little bit as to what they share, what they make available. But the working is pretty much the same. The way of making workflows and Lever is pretty rich. So those differences are minor. Our IT system is on-premise rather than in the cloud. Will we still be able to use Start? Well, that's an interesting question because we actually don't integrate much with on-premise. So that will be a question that I'd like to take offline. Maybe you have experience with integrations with APIs. We have an open API, so we do also integrate with other ATSs than that you just saw in the demo. But I'd be happy to do that investigation. Well, okay, Sophie, excellent. If there are more questions, please let them know and reach out to us, because I promised you that we would end on time to make your next appointment. So we want to thank you for your for showing up, for your interest. And we're happy to continue the conversation and I'll answer your questions. So enjoy the rest of your day. And on behalf of Thomas as well, I want to thank you a lot for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.